Good evening, one and all. Should have had my headphones ready. There they are. Give me a second. Coming up. It's coming up. And your voice is coming through on my mic, so that's why I'm going to put the headphones on. Welcome, and give me a second to get set up here. Yeah. Hey, Drew. Hey, Crosscut. Give me a second. Hey, Dave. I should be. Let me see here. Yep. Reginald, Matt, how are you? Let me do my little speaker. Hark, I hear. Sweet. There we go. That's much better. How are you, Drew? All right. Welcome, one and all, to Learn CNC with Javi, episode 9. And tonight, well, first let me say my hellos. My Twitch show looks just like my YouTube. Amazing, isn't it? This week, let's begin with a few introductions. Over in my in my headphones, as always, is Steve Nealon, and I'd like to give a shout out to Harneal Media, producer of fine maker and other websites everywhere in the community. For more information, visit harnealmedia.com or Makers Media Network, which is a wonderful group of makers. And you'll be able to get a hold of Steve through Makers Media Network, as you can with many of us, in case you need assistance, camaraderie, a hangout partner, whatever you want to, whatever type of assistance you need. We're all here for each other. All right. And my desktop is cluttered, so let me clean it up before there we go. So let us begin. And today we're going to do a few little things. We're going to screen share here. Just accommodating. All right. There we go. Let's see. Let's open up a new file. And as I stated, we're going to do, well, let's start with the Maker's Rock album. We'll just jump right into that this week. Hey, Steve, welcome. Shane, how's it going? We're going to start off with, since we are doing the Maker's Rock album, it's going to be 12 by 12. So we'll stick with that. And we'll stay right now with the size of 3/4 of an inch thickness, just for the heck of it. And down over here, I already have my albums. So I'm just going to drag a picture of I'm doing Weird Al's The Saga Begins. And I'll just go ahead and resize it as best as I can here. And we shall start with that. Let's go ahead and do a quick. Now, my plan is as follows. I plan to do a flat area where Weird Al is here, and another flat area here where the shadow is. And I'm going to duplicate the shape of Weird Al, probably do some sort of iron-on or an image transfer of some sort to have that pop out nice and simple. And this one, I'm just going to do a simple black piece outline there. The letters will be raised and they'll be cut out of whatever material I'm using. This background here, I'm going to texture, and I'm going to texture a little differently the rock. And again, this part will be flat over here. Again, it's all in the coloring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add some sand with glue for effect on the final piece, and a lighter colored sand on the rock, but it's also going to have to be some sort of a texture. So we'll jump right into it by taking this, and let's go ahead and choose a few colors to vectorize. First of all, what I'd like to do, in fact, I'm going to forego this because frankly, these colors are way too close to each other to auto trace. So we're going to have to do it manually. And the way I like to do it is simply go in and do an extremely rough shape. Clicking with a bunch of straight lines. I'm not worried about the details at the moment because as I go in, we'll do all the details later. We'll do another shape here for the shadow. And one other shape for this particular one. At the moment, I can't see the hand, so I'll just do a rough shape and we'll add all the details in a little bit. All right, so let's zoom in. Let's see. How's everybody doing this evening? Russ, how are you? Wolf, Eloy, Al? Yeah, let's see. Now, this section here with Weird Al Yankovic, again, I'm going to be working on the details later. And this is what the picture actually looks like. So let's go ahead and do all the main stuff, which that's another section. We'll have to now let's go to do the auto trace and see how many colors. Let's see. We can do that. We can do that. Nope. Nope. Yes. Some of these we want to do and some of these we don't. We want to try to get rid of the rock. And one of the things you have to keep in mind when you're working with there we go. When you're working with the auto trace function, a lot of the things you have to keep in mind is garbage in, garbage out. So if you have something like, let me get rid of this, that looks better. If you have something like all this extraneous rock, as in here, it's going to include all of that in there. So the best thing you could possibly do is if you only wanted a shape of Al over here and of the shadow and of the get rid of that and of the sky, the best thing you could possibly do is go into Photoshop, take the picture, and physically either raise the contrast to a level where they're both independent, or cut all this out in Photoshop first, and then something like that. Then you'll be able to work with that image a little better. So there's a rough image, and we'll continue this a little later on. I was just basically touching up on a little bit of the let's see what would happen. Hmm? Extraneous rock is awesome. Let me save this real quick and show you something considerably more simple. For instance, and yeah, 12 by 12 is fine. And now we'll do this particular album, which is Alapalooza. This is going to be practically a no-brainer, which is perfect for me. Yeah, any insult that comes in my ear, I go ahead and repeat it to so you guys can enjoy. All right, here we go. Thank you, Steve. Let's uh let's work with this one. And first thing, now what we want to do is we want to take these things separately, because if we were to say do the yellow and the red and the black, it would have one big image. So we don't want that. We want only the yellow, for instance. And then we say preview and apply. Now we have the yellow here. Hang on a second. Now you let me put the show you the without the bitmap here. Now we have everything that's yellow, and we should take all of this and group it together just in case if it wasn't grouped already. And we'll call this yellow layer. And now we're working with a new layer, so we'll go back to, and we'll choose. All right, have a good one, Al. Good luck with the fab thing. And now we'll do the red layer. And again, depending on the quality of your original bitmap, you're going to have all these little extra things that you may have to take care of. So an easy way to get rid of that is, let me see. You could reduce the color amount, for instance, and let's see if that works for us. Now we'll choose this red. Nah, that doesn't work. It's probably worse. Here we go. Yeah, there's still a lot of red in there. So I guess this will be the best bet. we're still going to end up with a lot of little tiny thingamabobs. Oh, by the way, I can get rid of hide the yellow layer. So now you'll see here we have the red layer. And a lot of little tiny dots. Well, the best thing you could do is select the whole entire thing. Only choose what you want, or rather unselect what you, it's all grouped. Ungroup it first. Select all. And why is it still grouped? There we go. So now we select everything. We unselect what we want and we delete. So now we just got rid of all those little nibbly bits. So there's the red layer, and we'll call it red layer, or just red. Now we'll do the black. In the black layer, we want anything and everything that'll fill in all the black as much as possible without. All right, who's that? Ah, have a good one, Wolf. Let me see here. And actually, for this one, I might want to do far less. Maybe a bit more than that. Get rid of the red and the yellow, and that looks almost good. So there's our black layer. So now we have our black layer, we have our red layer, and we have our yellow layer. So with that, you can simply go into, again, you have to go in there and clean it up. I'm not going to go in there and clean up every little thing because frankly, if you look at the original, this is actually, I forgot the name of this font, but I'm I'm familiar with it. And this also looks like one of the standard fonts. Just find the font, and you'll probably spend less time finding the font than you will trying to clean up all these little lines. These, however, it's a simple matter to clean up these lines, the yellow lines, and something like this. It doesn't take much cleaning up. And with that, you take the yellow layer, cut it into one shape, the black layer into another, and the red into another. For this particular project, you don't even need the black, unless you want to do a multiple layer thing where you have a black background, the red, the yellow, and then the black Alapalooza or Allosaurus Rex or whatever you want to call this. And then what I would do is I would take the image of the Al dinosaur along with this black and this circular, everything that's black inside the red. In fact, I would probably go first the black layer, then I would do one entire piece with only the outline of the red, then this outline here, then on top of then you have the entire black. I would put the white letters, whether you want to scroll it or whether you want to CNC it, these white letters and this yellow on top of the black. So you'll have the black on top of that red, on top of that black, on top of that yellow and white. And there you have a nice little handy dandy Alapalooza. And you know what? That one's pretty simple. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and show you guys next week the finished product. By the way, next week, for those of you that are interested, I'm going to be creating a or showing you how to create a do-it-yourself CNC probe for and the software necessary and all that for probing 3D objects. Can I center which part on the black? This mouse drives me crazy. Ca Oh yeah, you're not the only one that drives crazy for that. I'm with you, Steve. So I'm just gonna do the easy thing and close that one. Now, one of the things that I promised a couple of members, by the way, for those of you in the chat, did I ever do Jeff's logo? Jeff Connor, did I ever do your logo or not? Just out of curiosity. Everything's a blur these days. There's one thing I wanted to what somebody had requested. They asked me, how do you do a clean cut with on plywood? How do you get a really clean cut on plywood? And okay, perfect. Thanks, Jeff. How do you get a clean cut on plywood? And I will show you. Let's say you have a something you wish to cut out. Okay, so I'll have here's the profile, and I will have some text, for instance, and the text will say, there you go. Here's a plug to my friend Dave. I'll have a let's say I want to create just cut the letters out, Gatton CNC, out of a piece of ply. So, and all I want is the letters, but I want them clean. I don't want to spend time sanding and dealing with all of that. Well, here's my suggestion to all of you. First of all, we're going to do the simple profile cut as we always do. And it's going to go all the way through. So if we preview the, yeah, great. Let's pretend I have a 1/8 inch. Let's make it smaller than 1/8 inch, whatever. That's better. Okay, so these are going to be the letters. Now, for those of you who have CNC'd before, you know that the letters don't always turn out as crisp, even as displayed here in this low resolution image. By the way, I can knock that out, and knock that little A out. Well, how do you get a clean edge from your cut on the top and on the bottom? Well, the secret is two or threefold. The secret, first thing is you should be using a compression bit. And now one of the questions I get is, but Javi, wait a second, a compression bit. Now, first of all, for those of you who don't know, a compression bit will, okay, let's start with this. Let's say, okay, this is the top. Hang on. Let me try to align it in such a way that that this makes a little more sense. Here we go. Okay, so this is the top. And this is the top, clearly, and this is the bottom of your plywood. A downcut bit, if you start with a downcut bit, then it pushes all the sawdust down. So since it's cutting downward, it's not going to pull any of this edge up. It's going to create a clean cut along the top. However, when you get to the bottom, and even if you have unless you have a spoil board glued onto the bottom and then you got to sand away, you can't get a clean cut on the bottom because it'll push the small pieces of ply, the veneer of the plywood down. If you have an upcut bit, the reverse happens. The upcut bit will pull this up. Let me put this a little bit higher here. We'll pull this up so then you have it frayed on the top and not on the bottom. A compression bit is such that the bottom of the bit pulls up and the top of the bit pushes down. The top half is a down cut, the bottom half is an up cut. That's why it's called a compression bit. But here's how it's designed. It's not exactly half and half. For instance, most compression bits, somewhere in the neighborhood of, say, 1 inch, 3/16 of it is upcut on the bottom, and the rest of it is downcut on the top. And the reason they do this is the following. You're going to make a cut, at least their first cut will be at least 3/16 inch deep, because many of you may be asking, well, how do you get the compression bit in there if the beginning of the bit is an upcut? And if once you start cutting, because you're going to have to cut layer by layer, once you start cutting, that first pass will be with the upcut portion of the bit. Well, not if you if you put the bit deep enough. So when you have your profile and you edit your passes, obviously you're not going to make 25 passes. Let's go somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 passes. Now your first pass, it's telling me right now that it's going to be what is that? It's 3/16 already. What I would do is I would actually make the first pass a little bit thicker. And all you have to do is just choose the path and go, I'm going to go 0.25. I can actually go a 1/4 inch. That's not a problem. Wait, actually 3/16 is, yeah, it's just under a 1/4 inch. So it's perfect. Okay, not 25 inches, 0.25. Decimals help. So you have your first pass there. Let's get rid of that pass. And your last pass, if you want, well, let's do this again. Let's do this one at 0.25. This one's fine. This one's fine. And actually, let's put this one a little bit deeper at 0.6 or 0.7. Or your final pass is really low. That's assuming your router and everything can handle this. If not, take the first pass, and the first pass would have to be deep in order for the compression bit to for the top to be down cut already, and then you could just divide these a little further. But with that technique, you'll get a nice clean cut on the plywood. Another method is buy new bits all the time and keep them really, really sharp. But that doesn't always work. And the second method is using an offset, or rather doing a separate last pass, where you have 0.01, for instance. And what it'll do is, let me see if this is the correct one. Let me go a little slower. Nope, too fast. Let's see. All right. So basically, if you do the final pass, what it's doing, and this is a little bit difficult to see, but because it's no matter how slow I put it, it's still too fast. What it's doing it's cutting all the way down, and on the final pass, it's doing a last pass. What it's doing is cutting 0.01. It's cutting 1/100th of an inch outside of the letters. And the final pass, it will go in the full length and shave off that 0.01. Now, be careful because you're still if you and this will allow you to nibble off a bunch of pieces, and then that last little 0.01 on the edge is nothing. But be careful because that first 2 or 3 passes, if you do nibble off a tiny bit, you still might get some tear out because the compression bit is an upcut bit first, then a downcut bit. So, anyways, there's that little trick. Yeah, decimals definitely save CNC beds. All right, Robert, now that we got you here, let's Robert from Crosscut Creations asked me to work on a little a bulldog logo of his, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you were having some issues with curving some letters or something like that. Let's see if we can do that for you. Um, Here is your mascot. Oh, thanks, John. All right, so let's see. Oh, goodness gracious, this mouse drives me crazy every week. But it is what it is. All right, so let's do something like that. We'll do a simple trace on it. Black and white. Default, default, default. And yeah, that's a good size. Apply. We'll take our I'm rushing through the actual auto trace. If you have a good image, as you guys can see, if you have a good image, you have a good trace. And I'm going to take and remove the bitmap layer. This is the bitmap layer. Now, as you'll see, as I've shown you in the past, if I go to the modes, to the nodes, you're going to see that it's hey, Corey, how are you? If you'll go to the nodes, you'll see that it is, well, they're extremely, well, way more nodes than I would like. So as always, after you auto trace, just to save time on your machine, at the very least, do a quick fit curves to selected vectors. Use Bezier curves because this is not a circle or anything. Preview. Just took away a whole bunch of nodes and it still looks roughly the same. Always verify that it still looks roughly the same, because sometimes you'll end up getting an image that's very different than the original. As you can see, this one is already different from the original. So this one is completely different from the original. So I would undo that. And you know what? We'll just go ahead and leave it with all those nodes for the moment. We could play with them a little bit and get them more refined, but time is money. What we wanted to do with this particular sign, let me see, here we go, is, what was it on the bottom, Robert? Was it St. Augustine? And on the top was bobcats or something, so St. Augustine was on top. We'll try that. Let's see here. Let's see if we have Harrington, because I know he wanted Harrington, but yes, we do. St. Augustine Bobcats top. So what we can do is we'll take the St. Augustine here. And okay, gotcha. You want St. Augustine Bobcats around the top. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get rid of the bitmap layer. Let's move this down a bit. Okay, so we have our St. Augustine Bobcats. But now what we want to do is we want to fit it on a curve. Let me see if I'm not confusing my... Oh, hang on a second. There we go. So here we have wrap text along a curve. So first of all, we have to create our curve. So let's do a curve from here, continuing here, somewhere in the middle, and ending here. Why did that not work? Because I didn't do a 3-point curve. Let's try that again. Do 3 points. Here we go. One here, and one here, roughly. Let's close this. So that's the rough curve that we want to do. So we take and we choose these letters, this curve. So let's see if you let me slow down for you guys. First, we choose the letters. I'm holding the shift key. Then we choose the curve. At that point, all of this is available to you. You could set it on the middle here, above the curve, which we do want it above the curve. We want it in the middle. We want it aligned, or we can keep it vertical. Well, if you align it, it looks like this. If you keep it vertical, it looks kind of funky. So aligned is definitely better. You can maintain the text. Well, the text size is too big to fit on the curve, so we won't do the text size. So there's the St. Augustine. Oh, goodness gracious with this mouse. All right, so there's the St. Augustine Bobcats. And now that we actually have the curve and everything done, we'll take this and we'll increase the letters because we could still... So it looks a little better. Well, so there's your St. Augustine Bobcats. I would remove the curve because we're finished with that. If we do a simple V-carve on it, just to show you what it looks like. And by the way, I'm going to remind me to give you guys a tip on V-carve. Oh, great speed. There we go. So we have our Bobcats. Now, clearly, this St. Augustine part looks a little bit too thin. So there's a few things you can do. One of them is choose a thicker font. Hey, Mark, you made it. Another thing you can do is go back to the original, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but give it a little offset outwards. Uh, it's nah, that's going to look horrible. Yeah, the best thing to do is start with a thicker font if that bothers you. If this is fine, then more power to you. The other thing you could do is, but it may not look as good, is take this St. Augustine, just that section, and do another V carve. Let me duplicate this. All right, so I will now I want only the St. Augustine bobcats, and I will go a little bit deeper. So um yeah, you're gonna have to do it on your let's see. Yeah, vcarve is a function. So the way to do it is manually take the file, create a separate toolpath, lower your Z, and try it. Sometimes it looks okay, sometimes it looks ugly. Um, Definitely do it on a waste piece, or you're not going to be. Yeah, and like you said, a different font isn't the end of the world. So there you go. That's at least you got a general idea of how to curve the letters. Now let me make a little note about uh, V carving. Let's say I have, yeah, let's just save that. You could add a stroke, and so you could actually take these St. Augustine letters and do an offset both inward and outward by, say, let's try point 0. Let's try 0.01, see how much that does. That helps a little. Let's try 0.03. That might work. All right. So, do 0.03, delete the original and offset. So now we have this file. So let's take a look real quick. To see what this one would look like. A little bit better. Possibly. The other thing you could do is get rid of the inside pieces. I mean, you could have done the stroke before without the inside, but, well, too late now. Let me just... This is where something like the this tool, selecting all the insides, comes in handy. I am using the selection tool. I am making sure to skim the top of the E so I don't touch it, but include all the other little pieces. And that way I can yep, that O needed to be there. And so did the inside of the B. Sometimes it's faster just to go and click each one. Nope, that need that one. So you'd still have to do inwards and outwards because there are certain things like the inside of the A and the inside of the O and the B's, things like that. But these inside strokes here you don't need. And with that, let me see here. And well, I deleted the E, but who cares? This is, well, I'm sure everybody will care there. And yes, you could make it thinner, Steve. Let me see here. Okay, so as you see, I made the, well, obviously that E is a mess, but these letters are far thicker than the original. Now, if you want to thin the Bobcat out, you could again do choose the entire thing and offset inward, delete the original, or rather select new and offset, and try to V-carve that. Let me put a new V-carve on this. And the other thing is that you could do a shallower pass, but in order to do that, because V-carve, the way V-carve works is it goes right to the edges. So it doesn't allow you to adjust the size. See that one. Oh, hang on a second. Yeah, you could cut to a flat depth, but that will not, okay, that will not alter the outer edges. It will, let me explain what that does. That's the next step I was getting to. Preview visible toolpath. So this made it a little lighter. That is clearly lighter than this. So that's one way to do it. Now, if you take, let me see. Yeah, there we go. So here's the original. Now, let's say I take and do a flat depth. So now my flat depth will be, say 0.01. Just for the sake of a number. I mean, a very, very shallow number. Now, what'll happen is you will end up with, it's still going to be, let me put something a little bit more visible than 0.01. Let's try 0.1. What'll happen is it will still go to the ends. There's no way around that. But now it'll only cut up to this depth. That's one of the I would say that I would love to see that feature in V-carve if there's any way you could adjust the bit on the fly manually. That would be a really good feature, because right now the way it works is your V-carve, it's you just put, now you could do your, now that's one thing you could do is you could go deeper and you could go lighter. So here's another way to do it. Again, there's many paths to Rome. So let's say I wonder if you could set a negative start depth. Let's find out, shall we? Didn't think so. To fix the missing hole on the letter E, I would have to, well, I would have to go back. But another way to do it is, in case you did make a mistake and you don't have an undo, what I would do is go through the same procedure that I did before and type in an E, apply. Where's my E? There it is. I did not auto trace this one. Now you have the E there. It's going to be a little smaller than that. It's going to be rotated a little bit. So this is something that you're better off just creating the shape itself. But in fact, what I would do at this point is just do this. I would convert to curves, take that piece, put it in there, reduce it because it's got to be a little bit less than that, and rotate it just the right amount. Say -5, apply, maybe -2 more, apply, apply. There you go. So there, your E is somewhat fixed. Well, this is a nice one. I started the depth at 0.5. By the way, this is how to make something thicker, just in case you're wondering, because you can't do thinner, but thicker you could do. You could calculate it by, I just lowered it by 0.01. So another way to do that, St. Augustine, but again, keep in mind when you do something like this, it does not look good. I'll do the first V carve. Only the first V carve will be only the bobcat, and we'll start at 0. Calculate. The second V carve, we shall do only the letters, and we'll start at 0.1. So we'll start at 1/10 of an inch down. Now, what it's doing is it's actually cutting the letters, as you see, 1/10 of an inch down. So it makes them look thicker, but they're practically unreadable because they're binding into each other. I mean, obviously, you could play and adjust that number as you want, but no matter which way you adjust it, it's all it's doing is making the bit deeper. If you had a single line font, that's one thing. But if this is probably the best one here, but um, again, you could play around with it and adjust it as needed. I'm going to go ahead and save this one. And we're coming up on 5 to the hour, so the last thing I wanted to talk about was the V carving. Let's say you have, let me make I'm going to set a thickness here of 1/4 inch. And I'm going to do a nice, long, funky looking triangle. All right. Hey, I didn't close there. And I will V carve that triangle. Stop that. Okay. As you'll notice, it says material thickness will exceed 0.25. I'm going to click OK just to show you what it looks like. That triangle, first of all, looks like this. The V carve will start at the very tip and it will fill in, it will go with a V until it gets to about, I'd say, well, you'll see right now. Right about here, the V carve is so deep that that it's basically cutting through the bottom of the piece. So that's one thing you always have to watch out for. You will get a warning. You will get a warning when the V carve goes through the material. So when you're working with V carves and there's an area that's bigger, let's adjust this a little bit, uh, just so I could illustrate the point a little better. And reset and do it. So you'll see here, all this entire way, it'll go deeper, it'll go deeper, it'll go deeper, and then it'll go a little shallower, but it will never reach the bottom. But here, that V-carve bit goes past the bottom. So it'll clearly go all the way through to a depth of 1.2, and that will cause an error in your machine. So obviously the solution, maybe not so obvious, but the solution is to create a flat depth of say 0.2, or if now keep in mind 0.2 gives you 0.05 on this area. It'll be 0.05 and it'll be 0.2 of depth. Let me explain this a little better. It will stop at 0.2. So if you're looking at the piece from the side, let's see if we can zoom in on this. Nope, didn't think so. Sometimes you can. Let me see if I can. Oh yeah, it helps if I have, that's what I want. This. All right, so that's going to be ugly. Okay, so the piece as you see it is going to be, it's going to stop here at 0.2. So you're looking at the bottom, what's left is 0.05. If you're okay with a piece that thin underneath, that's great. If not, then choose a lighter, shallower point. If you go, say, 0.01, not only will it be way up here and it'll give you it'll give you 0.24 inches of wood, but it's also going to fill this part in. So you're basically getting the very, very edge, and it stops at 0.01. And for something like that, for those of you that V-carve, you know the best thing you could do is use a flat area clearance tool. If you're using your V-bit to carve out every bit of this area, that's just an incredible waste of time. Select a whichever end mill you want. Calculate, and you'll have to swap bits, but in the end, it'll be a nice, clean, flat cut. You won't be using the tip of a V-bit at minuscule increments, and it'll take forever to clean it out. So there's one thing you have to watch out for when you use V-bits is the depth of the cut, or actually better said, how wide the piece you're V carving is. Because if it's very wide like this, that V-bit, they will do the calculations from corner to corner in a triangle fashion and go right through the piece. And that, as they say, is that. Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's really it's a little bit design. I mean, when you're working with a very good point. Let's see. I'm not sure if the chat will pop out in the video, so I'll read that. Corey says, never ceases to amaze me how much knowing vector illustration software translates almost perfectly in V-carve. This is a great example. And it is. There are two big aspects of using the CNC. Two major, uh, I guess, skills that you should have. Let me switch out of this thing, and there we go. There's two major skills you should possess when it comes to working with the CNC. One of which is basic design, and I don't mean, artistic design. That's different people have different different levels of artistry, but working with uh, working with the art itself. Because if you're converting a bitmap to vectors, the first thing you need to do is be able to differentiate the different parts of the bitmap. If you have something that's has very little contrast and it's almost the same shade, you have to realize that I don't care how fancy the machine is, it's garbage in, garbage out. You're not going to get a good vector image from, you know, one big, huge uh, a sand. You're trying to get a sand dune from the beach and it's all brown. It's not going to happen. But if you, for instance, in the beginning of the episode, that rock with Weird Al, if you take the time to trace out Weird Al, who's wearing nothing but brown in front of a brown rock, and you trace away the rock and you leave nothing but Weird Al, you can actually auto trace the shape like that. You should be able to work with contrast. Well, that's one aspect, is the design part of it, the bitmap part of it. The other part is the vector part, and that's just two of the major skills that you should have, or you should work on for designing different things in the CNC world. There are a lot of other skills that go along with it, like working with nodes, working with curves, working with layers, knowing which layer to put on top of which layer. Uh, this, there's just so much to talk about. I'm going to be working on different projects, and I'll be mentioning these things over and over. And hopefully, if you continue watching, you'll and practice along with me, you'll get a little more practice at it, gain a little more knowledge. And with that, I'm going to bid you all a nice good evening. Thank you all for coming. And I'm sorry I couldn't catch up on the chat there, but I'll be scanning it after the show. If anybody has any last minute questions, go ahead and place them on the chat there. The next vertical table build. That's a good question, because I'm going through some. I just sold a business and I just purchased another business, and my partner and I are going through some not my painting business, that's still working, but this new one. So my time has recently been all of a sudden limited. My retirement went into my semi-retirement went into non-retirement mode. So I'm going to see if I can do something this weekend. What I've got left, just so you're aware of on the table build, because it's perfectly functional. In the horizontal format, it runs perfectly fine. I'd rather not run it without a CNC. I mean, without a spoil board on it. So I'm not going to be cutting anything anytime soon. I might take a chance, but I bought the spoil board. As if you've read my Facebook posts about the wonderful employees in the box stores asking what MDF was, while it was right there behind them. And the spoil board, the pulley system when it's vertical, and the what was the other thing? Oh, and the cable management. Those are three very important things, because those cables, I almost pulled one out the other day, and because I wasn't watching it, because they're all rolled up and they're all everywhere. I'm working on. Allow me to show you. Still needs a little more glue, but here's a section of this was cut from pieces of plexi. For those of you who saw my show last week, I basically, there you go. There's your drag chain cut from pieces of plexi. It would have been better. It would have been better to cut it out of wood or out of HDPE, but unfortunately, I had a bunch of plexi left over, and I didn't have the other two handy. So, yeah. And so the drag chain is probably one of the next things I'll do, and I'll see if I can do that maybe Sunday if I have some time. I'll try for Sunday. And the pulley system, the reason why I want the pulley system in there, for those of you who aren't following along, is in the horizontal, I've got it to work at 400 inches per minute, which is ridiculous. You don't need that speed. But in the vertical, I'm maxing out at 100 before it binds. My goal is to have it work in any position at 200 inches per minute without a single issue. And I've yet to lubricate the screws or perfectly align them, so there's still that. But there's 70 pounds on the gantry pulling down. I don't want that kind of weight. And when I turn it off, it actually it pushes the screws down. So I've created, I have them in the other office. The pulleys that I created last week, I cut them out. I put the bearings in them, glued them together. They look fantastic. I'm going to assemble them all, attach them to the ceiling, and run a rope and some weights, probably 35 pounds each side. That'll counterbalance it'll counterbalance gravity is what it'll do for the no matter which way it's positioned. So that'll always be helpful. And I think with that, that'll be those three items. Once I have those three items, and I'm not really in any rush. I mean, as you can see, I've got a working CNC. But for you guys and for me, I'll try to get on it as soon as possible. So yeah, I'm going to probably be on YouTube from now on, because Twitch is just very difficult for a lot of people to get to. And YouTube will still send me the full. Now, this way I can have the full episode, and probably a week or two later, after I cut them up and get rid of all the boring stuff, like me talking about drag chains or whatever, and just stick with the 3 to 5 minute lessons, as you've been seeing on YouTube. I'm going to have both. I'm going to have the full episode if you want to see the full episode, and I'm going to have the little sections titled if you ever need a refresher on that. That way you don't have to watch 45 minutes just, oh, where was that section? And that's about it. Because yeah, some people have been complaining about Twitch. It's hard to get to. There's at the moment there's no benefits. So, and with that, let's see. I guess I'll bid you all have a happy evening and a great week. And I'll see you guys hopefully on a live chat this Sunday, if anything. Good night, all.